This is the world of Salesforce and Dropbox, HubSpot and Evernote, a world unthinkable without cloud software services. Most businesses and consumers use SaaS every day to get work done. Driven by the internet and ever-expanding availability of bandwidth, SaaS has come to dominate our lives in a very short span of time. But developing a defining service, often ahead of its time, getting users to engage, secure funding, protect IP, and building a truly remarkable and successful SaaS is not an easy task. SAAStories brings conversations with the dreamers and visionaries who dared to think ahead. How they built their SaaS, genesis, struggles, trials, tribulations, and eventually success. Welcome to SAAStories. Thank you for your time and for joining us in this session. I have a favor to ask. While you continue to listen to the podcast, please leave a comment or rating at iTunes or wherever else you get your podcasts from. I personally look at each comment and will give you a shout out to each of you in our following episodes. It means a lot to hear from you. Just a quick intro to PitchLink. Time and again, when I ask sales leaders what keeps them up at night, they say, my message. Dig a bit deeper, they're all aware that every time a narrative is presented by a salesperson, it is different. The most accurate presentations are from the top-rated sales folks, but for the rest, it's all over the place. Crafted narratives can remain exactly the same while individual salesperson personalize it for individual prospects, down to the exact opening welcome introductory message. Exact every time. Yet personalized to the individual company and its executives. Sounds impossible? Well, just ask us and we'll show you how you can do it with PitchLink, time after time. Want to know more? Sign up for a free one-on-one session. Welcome to this new exciting episode of SAAStories. We speak today with Brady, founder of Revenue Growth Consultant and creator of the Founder 500 course.
The other interesting thing too about SaaS now, beyond the decreased barriers to entry, it's just such a profound sort of business model, right? You tend to have very high margins. You have low to zero cost of distribution. Same thing with scale. So it's not impossible for a lot of interesting businesses, once they can get just some sort of minimal product market fit, to build a high 6-figure or low 7-figure revenue business with very little initial capital and not a whole lot of scaling.
Brady is an experienced startup operator and entrepreneur with an expertise in revenue design. He helped Interseller.io go from 0 to 2 million and now has a new course, Founder 500, for startup founders who want control over their sales growth. Now on to this episode with Brady. Let's dive into this episode. Steve, welcome to the show. I'm delighted that after a bit of back and forth, we nailed down a time and welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Amjad. I'm super excited to be here.
So before we get into what I think will be a very meaty discussion today, tell our audience a bit about you and the work you have been doing.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Brady. I do revenue growth consulting now through my own venture, SXS Consulting. Before that, though, I've spent 10 years in mostly individual contributor and some leadership roles in SaaS. Most recently, what we'll talk most about today was my 3-year journey growing Interseller from basically 0 to a team of about 15 and just under 2 million. Before that, I'd worked at Square for a few years in New York, some other SaaS startups before that, and I have most recently moved to Portugal. Been here for almost a year, and just really sort of loving life as an expat in Europe.
Wonderful. So the biggest challenge, I think, founders, especially of SaaS companies, and everybody is a SaaS founder today, right? And for good reason. I say it in a good way because that's how easy it has become to get started, right? You have an idea, you have a friend who can put together code, or possibly you put together code yourself. You can literally hammer out something in a couple of weeks and get it tested. So once people get past that stage, Steve, the perennial problem of business returns, which is how to sell it. right?
Yep.
So that has been a problem since business started. How do you sell it? And it's no different for SaaS founders. What exactly is the challenge, and what did you see when you were trying to move the needle at Interseller?
Yeah, it's a great place to start. And I think the other interesting thing too about SaaS now, beyond the decreased barriers to entry, it's just such a profound sort of business model, right? You tend to have very high margins. You have low to zero cost of distribution. Same thing with scale. So it's not impossible for a lot of interesting businesses, once they can get just some sort of minimal product market fit, to build a high 6-figure or low 7-figure revenue business with very little initial capital and not a whole lot of scaling needs. So yeah, it's a really great time to be in the space. So yeah, at Interseller, it was interesting because you had a pretty classic case of two technical co-founders. And then they had gone through a sort of like Y Combinator-esque like incubator program in New York. And once they got accepted and went through the process, they realized after getting a small, I think it was maybe like a $250,000 convertible note type investment, they realized, great. So obviously we have investor validation. We have some initial traction with some customers, and we know nothing about go-to-market. So with that, first raise, they found me, and that's how I joined the company and kind of took on the entire customer-facing organizations as one person, and that was a really fun, typical wear a lot of hats, try to figure everything out as you go, building the airplane while you're flying it sort of stage. And I think what I learned a lot in being given the reins to sort of run the whole thing is how much of it is sort of mysterious to technical founders, and or what are some sort of like core skill gaps that more technical product-oriented people have when they're starting a business and trying to figure out how to actually sell it, how to design a revenue system, how to design customer success and enablement. And what I learned most in this journey is that even though I consider myself a pretty talented sales professional, there are a lot of systems and processes that can really be done by anybody, so long as you sort of have like the playbook to go about it. And personally, I believe that, the best person to get to the first, at least call it the first $500,000 in revenue, really should be the founder. And that's sort of something I want to evangelize now, is that the best salesperson of any company when they're getting started should be the founder or one of the founders.
This is interesting. So I'll just back up a little bit. What were you doing just before Interseller, and what sort of made them? I mean, I can understand their urgency to find somebody who understands the space. How did the Interseller fit happen between you and you and Interseller fit? That is.
Yeah, really good. That's a good question, and kind of a funny one, funny story. But at the time, so this was, I think it would have been August 2015. So I had been, August 2017. I'd been at Square for almost like 2.5 years. And so that was a really fun journey, because I joined when it was just about 900 employees, pre-IPO, new office in New York. So then saw just massive like hyper growth and see a company go public. So I got to do a lot of the things I wanted to do in sort of that phase. And I was starting to look for the next thing. And I was going through, okay, do I want to try to grow further within the company? Do I want to go into another, late series B or C type of thing? And what I realized I really wanted to do was start at the ground floor and really build from, 0 to 1, basically. And so as I was looking, I think it was like an AngelList posting or something. I saw they were looking for, first account executive, and I started to play with the free trial of the product. And I think that was a really great selling point for recruiting, because it gave me a chance to really dig into the product myself. And being a salesperson, I was very familiar with similar sales engagement platforms and like the solution that they were creating. And I actually had the problem. So being that I was a customer and someone who was pretty competent in using these products, it made it very easy for me to, sort of articulate how I could come in and build a, revenue system around that. And then also be confident myself that, not just selling them that I was the right guy to do it, but selling myself that, hey, there's really an opportunity here to build a multi-million-dollar business in a couple of years. And that would be very invaluable for my, career growth and just sort of another notch in the belt and experience. So that led me to apply, and then, went through the typical interviewing process, and rest is history.
Wonderful. So let's double back to where we were. You came in as the first professional salesperson on board, and your job was to get this whole business, which had no revenue. You needed to kickstart that process. So tell us a bit about what you saw, and what did you do to get them from zero to, say, $10,000 in the first instance, because that would be the first milestone, right?
So when I joined in October 2017, there was, I think, we were just a little bit under about 5,000 in MRR. And what was interesting is that was really a very mixed bag of customers. None of them really looked the same. There was some cohort that were paying, $15, $20 a month, which were like the first 25 customers or so. Most recently, they were paying more like $50 because they had done a price increase right before I joined. So the first thing I did was try to understand, okay, what have we done successfully? What should we be focusing on? Is there a specific niche that is already showing success? Or if we don't have them as customers, what is maybe one or two very narrow sort of, market segments or industry verticals that we should target, where we can create very clear positioning in the marketplace and a very specific sort of solution set. So that's where we got started. And then what we drilled into at first was just small software sales teams. So we were thinking we would try to compete against like a SalesLoft or a Outreach, and be a not such a feature-rich solution, but we wanted to be a easier to use, easier pricing, and a more complete system where you could do your contact data plus your outreach automation and sync to like 24 different CRMs. So that was the focus. And then the first thing I asked for, which I got a lot of pushback at first, was within the first quarter, I wanted to double the price from $50 per month per user to $100. And there was a lot of reluctance. And I think this is pretty common with a lot of founders, especially very product-led founders, is that they either undervalue intrinsically sort of what the solution is bringing to the customer. And then there's also, I think, this sort of misconception that if you want to do like a product-led growth type of strategy, that it needs to be priced on the low end. So I wanted to challenge that and just say, look, we're getting tons of great feedback from the small customers that we do have. Let's just try doubling the price, and if it doesn't work, we can cancel it. If it does, great, then we'll keep running with it. So that was probably the first like 90 days. We went to 100, had no problem. That was really great. And all this time, what I was mostly spending the first 90 days doing was trying to figure out between like the sales and recruiting personas that we were going after. The only real lever that you can pull at this stage is outbound. There are, certain businesses and certain segments can make more sense to do, paid or like content, but early on, especially if you're bootstrapping, it's just really hard to commit that kind of capital when it's much lower cost to do outbound, and you're going to get a lot better feedback too, because you won't necessarily know how paid is performing. And content is such a long tail for when the success comes that you're not going to really see if that messaging is sticking and if it's growing your SEO until 2 or 3 quarters. But outbound, you send an email, you either get an open or a reply or you don't. And when you get the replies, you'll see, is this message working? Yes or no. So that was really what I was leaning on for. In the first 90 days, we just basically used the product. Myself, I was really more of an SDR than anything. I probably sent 2,000 to, somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 different contacts were touched each of those first couple of months until I really started to narrow in, okay, we're looking for somebody with this title at this type of company, with this many in headcount and has, some sort of pain that looks like 1, 2, or 3. And then that really started getting clear and dialed in around the second quarter. So maybe March or April in 2018, we were very clearly understanding, okay, this is the things we search for in Sales Navigator. When we have that list, we can throw persona 1 into email sequence A, persona 2 into email sequence B, etc. And then I was able to take the process that I was running, keep it very, very documented and easy to follow. And then what helped me accelerate the growth as a one-person team still, because I also had to do all of the onboarding, right? So when somebody comes in, we had to, or someone comes in for a trial, I've got to help them get that figured out. Once they convert, we have to make sure they get successful in the first 30 days to keep churn down. So once I had the SDR stuff figured out, I went and hired somebody off Upwork after doing, probably a project with 10 different people, the best one that came out. And she was able to basically do at a very high level what most people feel they need to spend, $30,000 to $50,000 in salary. We were able to do, for $10 an hour or something. And that was a really big help because it, took a lot of that repetitive sort of low value task off of my plate. So I could focus a lot more on demos, customer onboarding, more strategic projects. And then B, it also proved that we were able to create a process that was simplistic and well documented so that anybody, even somebody outside of the org, could come in, follow exactly the process to a T, and drive strong results.
So at this point, it's the second quarter. So your jump from 5 to 10,000 happened purely based on your doubling the price, and now
pretty much.
And this 90 days, you have sort of experimented and figured out through your outreach program the multiple personas who are likely to respond and the pain points possibly they have, which means that's copy for your email that, okay, if you talk about this pain point, it's likely that such and such person is going to respond and so on. And you go out and hire a hand from Upwork on an hourly basis. And by end of quarter 2, where does that take you?
End of quarter 2. So let's see. By the time we got to the end of the first year, we were at about just a bit shy of 20,000 in MRR. So I would say around there we were around 10 to 12 and a half, something like that. So we were growing at this pretty nice 18 to 25, 30% clip month over month for the first year or so. Right.
Fantastic. So what happens next? So you have gone from 5,000, this is when you joined, 180 days, you are at 20,000, and you have not spent any money on PPC or in any other kind of advertising at all.
In fact, in the entire 3 years that I was at Interseller, we didn't spend anything on paid except for, I think we ran 2 or 3 different experiments with a $500 budget each, testing Facebook, and we wanted to test LinkedIn as well. Because what we also realized sort of once we got to the second year, we kind of figured out that what was really the easier niche to focus between the sales and the recruiting niche was recruiting, because what we discovered was the way that recruiters use LinkedIn, and this was something that we knew, but we got a lot more data from having more discussions, right? Over a year, you start to look and see, okay, what customers are retaining and expanding and what ones are churning, right? And which ones are giving us the most support tickets, which ones have the shortest deal cycle time, and all of it was pointing to a very specific type of recruiter, somebody who is either the owner and sole operator, or maybe they have like at most 5 employees. Mm-hmm. So their budget's a little low. They're not really that tech savvy generally, but they're spending a lot of time on LinkedIn doing things like InMail or connection requests, et cetera. So it became very easy for us to say, you're already using LinkedIn, but InMail is not working. You have no system for getting personal emails, which is why you don't email. And if you could email, you don't know how to do it in an efficient and scalable way. So that was sort of the story that we were telling. And then it became very easy to give that pitch, which you could do, in email at a high level, and then you do it in like a 5-minute call. And then all you really need to do at that point is demo and or give them a trial experience so that they can hit, like 2 or 3 things that we identify in that discussion are really important. So, and this is something I think a lot of founders inherently want to do or understand that they can do with their product, but they don't, by not really lasering into a specific niche and very specific like solution-based use of the product, they kind of just go all over the place and say, well, look at all this amazing reporting that we have, or, oh, you can integrate with all these different platforms. And then when they get in there, they kind of get overwhelmed with all the different things the platform can do, instead of, what most SaaS companies have understood is that a power user for most platforms is only going to use like 10% of the features, right? So if you operate from that level, then it helps you to really design like a demo and a trial and onboarding experience that focuses on what are like the core 5% features that they absolutely need to use to be successful. Let's get them to be an expert on that as soon as possible, right? So you get that feedback loop of, this is working. I can see the metrics that are improving for me. I use this every day or at least every week. So it's something that is becoming ingrained in my workflow. And that's really what we figured out in that first year and started to refine a lot more in the second year.
Right. Let's sort of understand how the next 2 years went. So by the end of the first year of your engagement, where were you? So you were in 20,000 in 6 months. Where were you in month 12? And how many people were you having in the team by then?
Yeah, at month 12, we were at about 20,000, somewhere between 20 and 25. And at that point, we had only, we hired a full-time SDR in, I think, August of 2018. And then unfortunately had to let them go in December of 2018. It just wasn't really working out. It actually, we were having better returns using contract workers instead. I think a lot of people overestimate the value that bringing someone on in-house brings and underestimate the amount of time and resources it can take for training and management. But then we brought on, shortly after that, our first customer success, sort of like all hats wearing, chat support, onboarding, technical support type of person. So by the end of 2018, we were 1 co-founder, myself, and the chat support. And then by the end of that second year, so like October 2019, we had hired 1, 2, 3 more people. We'd hired our second engineer. We hired our next 2 salespeople. And then by October 2019, this is like one of my favorite moments. I was on a vacation with my wife. It was our first wedding anniversary trip. And we were in Japan, and I was getting ready to go to like a dinner. And I, of course, not being able to completely unplug, I got a message on Slack, just as like a celebration that we had finally crossed the million ARR mark, which was like really my main goal that I'd set out when I actually, in fact, going back to your story about getting hired, I think one thing that made me stand out in my sort of like 90-day plan that I was presenting was that I had planned for us to get to the $1 million mark in 2 years, which I thought was doable, but a bit ambitious perhaps. And we did it in 2 years and I think 7 days.
So that was incredible. I mean, in 2 years, you got it from like $5,000 to $1 million, $5,000 per month MRR, which is like 60,000 per annum, to 1 million. Mm-hmm. That was incredible. Mm-hmm. And that's with like yourself, the co-founder, and 2 more salespeople. And 1 sales like customer success chat support person. So it's a team of 5 people who delivered to 1 million in ARR. Incredible.
Yeah, it was, and I think a lot of that is a lot more replicable than a lot of founders realize. But it comes from being very disciplined in focusing only on one. Like we were so narrowly focused. We only really had one persona, and that persona was like really, really niche and defined. Of course, if things came inbound and there was fit, we would sell to them. But we were still driving, I think at this point, 85% of all the net new revenue was from outbound. And so when you have this very narrow focus, it makes a lot of things easier when it comes to execution, right? You know exactly what your demos should look like. You know all of the objections. You know all of the potential integration, IT sort of security problems that might come up. And then once they convert to either a trialer or a paid customer, you know exactly what you need to do in the first 14 days, the first month, the first 3 months for them to be hitting these milestones that make them feel like they're getting a lot of value with the product and that they're going to retain. If you're all over the place, it just makes it difficult to get really good. If you've got 4 different personas you need to sell to, it's really hard in a year or two to get good at all of them.
Sure. I understand that. I completely agree. I think the biggest problem that new SaaS founders have is that they do not know what persona to focus on. It's time for a short break. Stay with us. After the break,
then what we did is we had gotten, we'd worked with a new sort of data partner on the contact side, where we started to get personal emails with really strong accuracy. And we had been listening to our recruiting clients say like, hey, the number one thing that we really need that you don't have is personal emails so that we can go after these candidates that aren't responding to other methods.
You are listening to a Business Podcast Network original. Podcasting is the fastest growing content marketing opportunity, which is untapped. We can help you craft your audio strategy and help leverage the wide reach and easy streaming capability that the smartphone penetration provides. It is easy, it is powerful and personal. Talk to us to find out how podcasting can help you build your brand and reach out to your targets like never before. Write to us at bpn@bizcast.in. That is bpn@bizcast.in. Business Podcast Network. Podcasts end to end. Welcome back. I'm Shubhanjan Sarkar, your host for SAAStories and founder of Pitchling, the buyer-seller engagement platform. Let's dive right back into this episode from where we left it. Your entire process was outbound at this point, correct?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And what was this process? Were you buying databases, or is it purely LinkedIn driven? How was it?
Yeah, good question. So we were very fortunate, right, in that we could really sort of, dog food our own system. And because at the core, what Interseller, there's basically 2 components. There's a Chrome extension, and, there's literally dozens of these, right? But a Chrome extension that when on LinkedIn and GitHub and like a couple other sites, could extract certain profile information and enrich it with phone numbers, business emails, personal emails. And then you click to push all that contact information into a CRM record as well as into like an email cadence. Mm-hmm. So we had, a sales enablement platform, a data platform, all free because it was our own tool. So yes, that definitely helps, right? Like, typically that kind of budget might run you, let's say $200 to $300 per month per seller. Would be totally within the realm of, you could pay more, you could pay less, but so we didn't have to pay for any of that. But that's really all that we were doing was LinkedIn, Sales Navigator searches with really tight Boolean sort of search strings, Interseller to get the contact, send it through the email sequences, wash, rinse, repeat.
Wow. Okay, cool. So this was the difficult part, but in the next 12 months, you did double your revenue.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. During COVID.
And that happened by doing the same thing, or did the playbook change?
It changed a little bit. What really ended up working to get that next million was we also then split out into two different plans. So in the year before, we added halfway through our second plan. So before it was only $100. That was everything. Then what we did is we had gotten, we'd worked with a new sort of data partner on the, contact side, where we started to get personal emails with really strong accuracy. And we had been listening to our recruiting clients say like, hey, the number one thing that we really need that you don't have is personal emails so that we can go after these candidates that aren't responding to other methods. So then that was a big help, right? Because it was a new easy increase in revenue with the same customer. It made the customer really happy because it was a new feature they needed. Then we decided to raise that price again to $200 so that we had two very easy plans. You had a $100 plan that was really geared towards salespeople, or if as we were scaling up the size of the recruiting teams we were reaching out to, we would now be able to sell into their business development sales teams as well as into their recruiting teams. They could use one platform to do both business development and candidate sort of marketing. Or if they weren't confident or didn't feel that they needed both sides, now we had sort of like $100 entry plan where if they had 2 or 3 salespeople, it's like, okay, great. Well, they need this. And then now we know that if this works for them for a year or something, now we have built your trust. We already are a approved vendor. Now we can try to win the 7, 8, 9 recruiters in the next couple, quarters, year, whatever. So that was really big. And then we also grew headcount by 7. So we were at this stage, I think we were 6 or 7 people, and then we added another 7 over the course of the year. So obviously that helped speed things up a bit too.
Right. So apart from the raising of the price, was there any other change you made in terms of your process?
Yeah, no. There's definitely some good process changes too. So what really worked for us was, and this is why we hired two other engineers in this year. So we got the total engineering team to 3 plus the CEO co-founder. And so what we really wanted to do was to become a kind of like the way Slack and a lot of SaaS tools want to build around integrations at the core, right? That a lot of the value is being able to seamlessly work with your existing other tech stack. And we had quite a few already, maybe like 20, but we had a backlog of, 10, 15 that were, pretty high value for our core customers, plus customers that we weren't able to close yet, especially those that were going up market. So that beyond raising the price, we consciously started to shift our outbound focus away from what had been working really well, which was 3 to 5 seat teams. And then we really only focused on 5 to 10. So this was sort of like going from an SMB to like a small mid-market, though it those classifications get really confusing because they're very different for everybody. But for us, it was really trying to double the seat count of the type of person we were going after, and that required more integrations. We also did some data improvements with more phone numbers, especially cell phones. So I would say those were sort of the two major sort of focus changes. And then we also had developed a new outbound structure where we were focusing on like a personalization at scale sort of approach. And that was driven by a really amazing hire that I made on the SDR side. She came in as an account executive, but with a marketing background. And then ultimately, after a couple quarters, we realized, your superpower is not necessarily in the full sort of, pipeline management, the seller process, but you're truly world-class at demand gen and top of funnel. So we shifted her into being sort of our third attempt at an SDR. And she did such a great job that she was able to fill pipeline for 3 other AEs on her own. And then at that point, we realized sort of the same thing I did with the Upwork SDR. Once I realized I had a process that I could pass on to someone else, we took Christina's process and codified it and then hired another SDR who was able to start hitting the ground running. And around that time is when I left, once that other SDR came on board.
That's great. One quick question before we move on to your current focus of working with founder-led sales teams. These integrations, were you trying to do native integration, or is it like a Zapier kind of thing?
These were native integrations.
So basically people didn't have to pay for using those integrations. They got it sort of inbuilt.
Yeah. And for us, what made it super valuable was unlike in sales, where there's really, obviously there's quite a lot of sales CRM systems or CRMs marketed to sales and marketing teams. So you only have, 5 major players will encompass 80+% of the user base. In recruiting, it's a lot more convoluted. And there's all these sort of niche and like legacy players that nobody integrated with. So it made it very easy for us to win against the small competition that we did have going after this marketplace by simply saying, hey, why buy another system if it will integrate and you're still going to have to copy paste all of this, top of funnel work? We're the only person who can integrate with your CRM. And, that was one of those smart strategy, like product focuses that our CEO is really good at, that made the selling and go to market that much easier.
Right. And was there any reason that you left? Was it that you were convinced that you needed to start something on your own, or?
Yeah, I'd say there's a confluence of probably 2 or 3 things. So at the same time, my wife and I, from a personal lifestyle change, decided to move out of New York, and we moved to Lisbon, Portugal, where we are now. And originally, now of course, this is also in the context of the entire world going remote first. Sure, we had done a really great job building a remote first team. When I left, it was 14 people, and we only had 5 of them in New York, and the rest were all distributed throughout the US. But the founder and I, the CEO and I, we were both coming to an agreement that the growth rate that I was looking for was maybe not the healthiest for the company, frankly. And I had already accomplished the 2 major things that I'd really wanted to do, which was 1 million and 2 million, and actually building a team. And so we both kind of came to the understanding that, between the 5-hour time zone difference, the difference in opinion on the rate of growth, that our journey had ended right there.
So just tell us, up to this point, how much money did Interseller raise, and how much was invested towards marketing and sales apart from salaries?
Okay, so at this point, there had still only been the 250,000 convertible note as part of the do that accelerator program process.
Right. Mm-hmm.
No outside capital, and no really outside of salary expenses. Whatever tech stack budget, etc. No additional budget applied to marketing. We did spend a little bit on content. Where did I have that? Yeah, around in the second year, maybe it was this year. We added. We started using an agency that was helping take a lot of the strain off of the founder for blog posts and helping optimize SEO, etc. But that was, I don't know, like a couple $100 a month, so nothing major.
So you moved to Lisbon and you decided that you will be able to take this playbook which you built while we are in Interseller, and you believe that it's a replicable model which can now be taught to founder-led sales teams.
Yep.
And what happened?
In moving, so I was trying to figure out, in a sort of month or two after I left Interseller, what did I really want to do next? Did I want to try to be like a VP of sales or another sort of head of sales role at another hyper growth kind of company? And then, typically what you find a lot of professionals do is they do one phase and then they sort of look and see, okay, well, what is another phase of business growth that I don't have that's interesting? And I kind of thought, well, I've worked at Series A, Series B. I've seen a company go public. I've gone from 0 to like 1 or 2. What do I want to go to another startup and go from 5 million to 50 or something? None of that was really that exciting. And I realized what I really enjoyed doing was kind of the initial solution solving, right? Helping a company go from 0 to 1 in whatever it is they're doing. Do they need to build their first outbound sales team? Do they need to figure out how to sell into a new vertical, right? That was what was really exciting. And I was fortunate enough to have a really good friend who had been consulting for a company. He had to leave to start, he was starting another venture. They needed someone to come in and build their first sort of SDR motion and then eventually build a team. And so I was lucky to kind of fall into consulting within the first month after leaving my last role. And then that's what I've been working on since then. And I think where I'm excited to start shifting my founder a bit more into is helping where I realize I can add the most value and have the most interest is helping founder-led sales if they don't have them or if they're reluctant to do them. And that's really what I'm going to focus on primarily going forward. So
this engagement that you have, are you doing the same thing or is it something different?
It's a little bit different. What I'm doing there is, it started off as a project, which was really interesting. And it was, okay, over 90 days, this is what we want to test and see if it works. Can we do our own outbound? Can we effectively prospect, message and convert to opportunities people in our space? And this is a very niche talent marketplace. Mm-hmm. So they do only certain JavaScript languages like React and React Native. Mm-hmm. And what they do is they have a marketplace of developers that work remotely or want to work remotely, mm-hmm. and they pair them with companies looking to hire them. So pretty competitive space, but they had been successful for 4 or 5 years with only inbound and wanted to see if outbound could be a lever to pull. So I came in and acted as the SDR. In the first month, kind of ran some testing, started to get some traction there, continued that process while starting the recruiting process to make the first SDR hire. Hired that person, trained, onboarded, got them up to, made sure they were hitting their milestones in the first month. And then they decided they wanted to hire a second, a lot further ahead of schedule. So by the end of 3 months, we had myself figuring it out, documenting, and hiring and training and overseeing 2 people. And that's what I've been doing on a routine basis for, like a day a week, basically, just checking in on that and sort of overseeing the outbound machine.
Okay. And how is the revenue bit? So is the sales now being done by the founder, or this is a different story altogether and not really what you intend to do now?
Yeah, more of the latter. So this is
Okay.
this is a sales process led by the two account executives, basically. And what I realized in working with this is more of the value that I can sort of unlock for entrepreneurs is going to be in helping a founder get their revenue faster, B, get it done in a predictable way that has, the ability to be repeated and scaled. And I think C, which is maybe the most important piece of it, avoid making the wrong hire or even the right hire too early. And, especially if you're bootstrap, right? Like deploying, if say you're at 10,000 MRR or less, hiring somebody who's going to cost you $4,000 or $5,000, $6,000 a month is really scary. Like that's a very big capital outlay. And at this stage, it's really hard to know when you're doing this with a salesperson that you're going to get it right unless you've gotten a decent foundation of it already figured out and proven by the founder.
I totally agree. So are you into any of these engagements currently, or how do you see your, for the lack of a better word, a playbook or the formula that you think you have, which is the repeatable stuff? How is that working in a non-interseller space?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I have not landed anybody just yet. This is really great timing, this conversation too, because it's really sort of crystallized for me within the last maybe month or two of like, okay, in consulting, it's really fun in a lot of ways because you're basically just a problem solver within a certain sort of, general area. But I realized very immediately that it would be hard for me to build the type of business that I want to own, being a generalist. So I wanted to immediately realize, what am I uniquely skilled at, and where is there demand in the market for a solution that there isn't a lot of delivery for. So that shift has happened, and now the conversations I'm having, there's actually I've got two potential clients where one I would come on and sort of do the same type of project as the SDR one, but come in and do the selling for them while teaching the co-founder alongside of me. Like they've got a ton of inbound and they need to get it closed better than they are. So it'd be, do that and then also sort of build the process and train them on how to backfill for me when I leave.
Sure.
And I'm also really interested in building, I'm kind of in the very beginning ideation phase of like some sort of digital content, or maybe even like a 6-week course where I can get very immersive with founders and teach them all the fundamentals of revenue design, right? From how to think about product market fit from a customer retention perspective, how to do your niching, how to do the prospecting, demo, close, onboard. Those sort of 6 areas are the key. Yeah.
And what kind of timeline do you see yourself coming out with this?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think what I'm trying to push myself to get it sorted within the next like 2 to 4 weeks. I want to get a cohort of probably no more than 10 founders that would give me a ton of feedback on the material and what is or isn't working, what to cut, what I should add maybe more to. And I would like to, we're in mid-August. I was pushing myself to try to get that first cohort in maybe like mid-September, the end of the month. And just get 10, 15 people, go through it, see what works, and then from there build either something that's like more self-serve, where maybe it's like recorded content that people can engage with, and or another live sort of engagement, depending on what the perceived value is from this first sort of test cohort.
I can say this much, that I also completely believe that the first $500,000 of revenue should be brought in by the founder, because that commitment is very critical, and that can actually set you free from the necessity to raise a lot of money, because most SaaS businesses don't need to raise a lot of money. You can be a $2 million ARR company making $1 million in net profit. It's very, very easy. It's very easy. And that's a lot of money. If you're making $1 million every year, it's a lot of money, right? So, and it's not so difficult to get there, provided you can sort of figure it out, of course. I mean, it's not that everybody's going to get there. They're not. You figure out the niche. I mean, obviously, in your Interseller story, lot of things fell into place. I mean, you're discovering the recruitment niche, you're discovering which size it works, and then the ability to up that size and double your price. I mean, there are multiple things which really worked out,
100%.
and right. So obviously, that part is not repeatable because you don't know. Having said that, if you can get the revenue piece fixed, the survival is not 10% of investments, but 90% of the investment. So you can literally flip it. So that's what excites me about what you're doing, and I think it's very timely. And I think whenever you are ready, we could sort of help you connect with founders who would like to come in and give you feedback and try it out, right?
That would be, that'd be fantastic. Yeah, that would. I mean, at this stage, what I'm really looking for at the beginning, right? It's really not revenue focused from my side. This would be like much discounted to what I would ultimately go to market for. But I need the feedback and the understanding that this is what people want and how to deliver it.
Right. SAAStories is brought to you by PitchLink, the buyer-seller engagement platform. PitchLink enables high-quality interactions between buyers and sellers through presentation and discussion modules. Sellers create personalized sales presentations and reach out to prospects through a non-intrusive, buyer-qualified engagement. PitchLink requires no installation or download and holds the entire repository of sales collaterals and buyer-seller conversation. Talk to us to know more about how you can engage with customers without intrusion. Call us on 990-216-3132. That is 990-216-3132. Well, Steve, this has been a great chat, and thank you very much for a very long discussion. And so it's wonderful, and thank you very much for coming and sharing. And we will circle back soon.
Yeah, thanks so much, Sanjay. I'm looking forward to the next chat.
We have a powerful lineup over the next couple of episodes with great conversations, including Marcus Wrench, founder Remarkable, Lazare Razilin, co-founder and CEO of Spoke, and many more. Subscribe in your favorite podcast app so you do not miss a single episode. Thanks for listening. Thank you for being with us today and listening to this episode of SAAStories. This is where I speak with the dreamers and visionaries who dared to think ahead and build world-class SaaS products. We hope this conversation helped you with the insights that you can go and apply right now to your own SaaS journey. We hope to have you here with us again in the next episode of SAAStories. SAAStories is brought to you by PitchLink, the buyer-seller engagement platform, and is a BizCast original production.